Dear all, thank you very much for attending this very first webinar of Havas Horizons, dealing with blockchain technologies. As you know, Havas Horizons is a dedicated offering from Havas Group to support emerging markets. On my side, I am Fabien Frechter, head of Havas Blockchain, Havas Blockchain being the offering from Havas Group dedicated to support states, corporates, and startups with a range of services to help the development of blockchain application and services with incubation, investment, consulting, tech, and global communication for sure. Maybe first, let me start inviting you to ask all your questions on the chat right on the bottom. And today's webinars is going to be very special as two words in its title are ambiguous: blockchain and Africa. As you know, Africa is the second largest continent of the world, containing 1/5 of the Earth's entire land surface. African landscape and resources vary regionally due to the contrast in relief, geology, and climate. The southeast is largely high plateau country. The northwest is mainly plain with shallow river basin and desert. The Sahara occupies about half of the continent north of the equator. There is no one Africa, as there is no one America or one Asia. There are a range of territories with different economies, different cultures, different languages. Taken globally, Africa is the poorest continent of the world. However, Africa is undergoing an economic revolution. This revolution has been very quiet. One of its parts is the blockchain revolution. Blockchain is the second word on our title, which is ambiguous, as there is no one blockchain, but a range of blockchain technologies. Public blockchain with the mother of them all, Bitcoin, but also consortium and private blockchain technologies. Today, we will talk mostly of blockchain technologies and their industrial development in Africa with our two guests, but also of crypto assets, their economic underlying structure. But before all, let me maybe introduce our two guests that I thank very much for the presence today. First, Nelly Chatu-Diop. You are based in Cameroon and you are the CEO of Ajara, a non-custodial investment hub supporting cryptos, fractional shares, and more. You are also a board member of Giotto, an application to complement modern machine learning with topology, a board member of Ningwa Lab, an African digital nursery specialized in innovative technologies, and the representative of Tezos in Africa, plus, by the way, a distinguished member of the African Network 10,000 Coder. And our second guest, Ashwin Rafichandran, who is the managing director at MEST Africa. Ashwin, you joined MEST in 2015 as a technology teaching fellow and served after as incubator manager for MEST Accra, before becoming the director of portfolio support and country director of Ghana. You have a background in computer science and engineering and previous experience working in the innovation team at Honeywell and building startup in India. You work at developing MEST, which is a Pan-African seed fund, incubator, and training program for technology entrepreneurs in Africa, with operations and active portfolio in Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, and Ghana, if I'm right. This being said, I suggest stopping to speak and let you both maybe add some elements of your biography if you want, but maybe start discussing a very first broad question about the specificities and maybe the needs globally of the African tech community. Maybe you want to start, Nelly?
Hello, Fabien. Hello, Ashwin. I'm happy to be there and to share some thoughts about blockchain in Africa. Some might find it very weird to associate the two words, but for me, it feels so natural. I find it very interesting that for this first edition, Ashwin and I share the same background as computer science engineers, so it might be somehow already like a first step in answering your question about what is about tech and blockchain in Africa. Maybe you could ask the question again because I already
No worry.
what you asked.
What are the specificities and maybe the needs of the African tech community today? The biggest specificities and need.
Oh, I will say that for the needs are similar for any kind of tech community that wants to evolve. If you look at the model of Silicon Valley, there was like a great funding coming from government or from VCs. There were like great universities that train like a large pool of talents, people that were properly trained and that could foster idea and be accompanied by mentors. So I would think that the work that incubators, accelerators like MEST Africa are doing are already starting to prove very effective in the ecosystem they have built. Namely, you mentioned Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa. Now it's up to the rest of Africa to also benefit from the emerging ecosystem. But in Francophone Africa, where I'm based, we are working on it, and hopefully we're gonna catch up our kind of lag or delay.
Cool. Maybe Ashwin, you want to jump on this first reflection?
Yeah, thank you for having us here, Fabian. And obviously, it's a pleasure to meet you, Nelly. And I've heard a lot about Ejara in the past as well, so it's good to be on a panel with you. Just to add something. So MES also has been in Francophone Africa. We started recruiting from Ivory Coast in 2017, and we've had presence from Senegal, Mali, Togo, Benin, Cameroon as well in our training program.
Okay.
So just to, I think, answer your question, Fabian, which is, I think, more around what does the African need in the ecosystem? I think the first need of the ecosystem is shared knowledge. Like, I think there's a lot of people currently available in the market, especially people who have been progressing in other ecosystems such as Asia and Silicon Valley. Like, I think how Nelly had mentioned. I think the first thing is shared knowledge, which comes with a lot of mentorship, comes with a lot of guidance, make sure that entrepreneurs understand what needs to be done. The second thing, which often a lot of people talk about, is I think just understanding the talent play here. So one of the critical things over here is I personally feel that Africans haven't realized that Africans are a massive talent force just yet. I think there's often the premise that they need to hire externally or outsource rather than actually develop a solution internally. Yes, it's going to take a little longer than usual, but the need is here. There's a massive population on the continent. There's a massive smart population on the continent. There's a massive smart young population on the continent. So if you look at it in those ways, you definitely need that talent is a big thing as well. The third thing, which I think a lot of people talk about, which is funding, supposedly. I personally think that funding isn't actually a big challenge because there's actually a lot of local, I think, wealth available. It's just that that local wealth has not been pushed into traditional entrepreneurship. So if you go ask an HNI, or if you go and ask a millionaire in Ghana, will you invest in equity in a company versus will you lend money to a company? They're like, we lend and just give us the interest rate and we're more than happy. Their understanding of equity investments, their understanding of growth of companies through equity, I think still isn't present. So for me, funding isn't a big issue, but talent and knowledge definitely is.
And is there any disparity in terms of countries? Because Africa is big, and you said Francophone and Anglophone Africa. What is your point of view between the different countries?
I think every country is very different, right? Just because you speak a language doesn't actually change that. But I think culturally also there's been a lot of, I think there's been a massive dependency, right? Like I think Francophone Africa was a little late to actually, I think, for the lack of the better word, like emancipate itself from the entire situation it was in and actually start pushing itself in that way as well. Versus I think Anglophone Africa was a little bit more steady, had a lot more presence, was not just focused on the French-speaking countries, it was focused on the global. So in that case, because of the legacy of how the countries and how the demographic has been formed, there is a difference. I agree. And I don't think we can actually oversee that. But I think in terms of pure play right now, we find that the entrepreneurs coming from Ivory Coast, the entrepreneurs coming from Ghana are pretty much the same. right? Except when they think about actually running the solutions in their markets, that's when the challenge comes in. Like we've had entrepreneurs who come to Ghana, learn everything a lot, but when they're like, okay, Ashwin, we need 4 months to go to market instead of 2 months to go to market. And you need to understand that's because it's so cultural. It's the market is slow. People actually believe more in the offline. It's very, very like, it's still, I think, adopting to the digital trend, but I think it'll get there soon enough.
Yeah, but Ashwin, what you are mentioning as if those only commas and like semicolons are really making a huge difference. To be honest, like a company like Ijara in Francophone Africa, I feel like as of now, I'm like the only ones doing that. But in Nigeria, you have at least 30, 40 companies like mine, in Ghana also. And it's not because you like the talents or you like the ambition here, but it's just so much more difficult. And for many reasons. Obviously, we don't have like institutions that are triggered towards encouraging like entrepreneurship, tech entrepreneurship. They are still learning what it is. They are still trying to overcome their initial fear, whereas in Nigeria, in Ghana, it's more established. The cultural difference due to, yes, obviously the former colonial empire, but also like for me, a language is not only like a way to speak with other people, it's also the culture you take with you. And I feel like in Francophone Africa, even when you talk to young people, they tend to aspire to be public servants, they tend to be less risk takers, and also the investors here are the same, and you could find that in France also. And it's only recently in France, with all the new government has been acting with the BPI and so on, that you find like a stronger startup ecosystem. But beforehand, it was very difficult. Whereas in Anglophone countries, they also share this Anglophone culture. So it's easier for them to take risks, to think about being entrepreneur first. And then when you come to talk to VCs outside of Africa. When you talk to an American VC and you say, oh, I'm an African-based company, he gets excited and say, oh, are you in Nigeria, Egypt, or Kenya? Oh, I'm in Cameroon. Oh, Cameroon. Okay, where it is? Is it like a city? Is it like a village? Is it, so, and I've really tried over the past months that I came back to Cameroon to really let people know that Francophone Africa as a whole is like a 300 million population, is a huge opportunity, but it still needs to get out there more often. And we should make sure to understand that it's still a huge struggle for people in Francophone Africa to get the same acceptance, the same exposure, the same opportunities that startups from Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Egypt, South Africa get.
And actually, there's a real disparity between the two sides of Africa. But you wanted to add, Ashwin?
Yeah, so I just want to say, yeah, I 100% agree with you, right? Like, I'm not saying that I don't, but it's just that I think for the basis of the question asked, I had to give an answer. I 100% agree with you. Like, I come from an ecosystem back in 2010 when I started running my first startup in India, where people thought I was crazy because I was not. I was dropping a job at a company which was designing aeroplanes to go start a recruitment software.
Yeah, I know.
And again, like at this particular point in time, like the whole stigma of family, the whole stigma of what society thinks about you. Yes, I'm very aware of those things, and those are challenges I have personally come through as well. But I think where we still sit today is, if forgetting all those social constructs, right? And if you look at ecosystems objectively, and that's how we start thinking of them, because stigmas are stigmas, rules are rules, societies will be societies, and the pressure will always be there. The nascency of an ecosystem will always develop. And where you're today, like I remember when Rebecca started her first company from Cameroon, and I met her in 2013. She was one of the only few females in African tech, and then running a company in Silicon Valley as well as running a company in Cameroon. So I think there are some trailblazers, such as yourself as well right now, who will spark the next change with people coming out and actually people becoming more and more comfortable, rather than becoming doctors, engineers, bankers, and lawyers.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe because that was a global, let's say, view on the tech and entrepreneur ecosystem in Africa, but Maybe Nelly, you want to jump to the more specific blockchain community, which is also a bit different, I guess. And at least, what is your point of view on how blockchain can help to tackle Africa's challenge, for example?
So for now, as you mentioned, there are disparities, right? So when you are in Nigeria, in South Africa, or in Kenya, blockchain and crypto usage have a high penetration. And I would say more crypto usage than blockchain per se, because when we talk about blockchain applications, for me personally, I would think about application in the healthcare, to drugs, for counterfeit medicines, or even land registry and the likes of it. But since it involves institutions, governments, like companies, it's going to take way longer, and also you need to have a larger talent pool. But about crypto usage, application in payments, in money transfers, and the like of it, everything related to B2C, enable transactions, enable people to trade outside of Africa, or even intra-Africa, because in Africa we don't share like a common currency. I'm really hopeful, and I really think that we are seeing very interesting companies, most of them, almost like 99% of them, coming from Anglophone countries. I hope Ijara will be a one to count in the Francophone spectrum. But yes, I mean, I think blockchain crypto was created for Africa, and that's really why I moved back, because I really think that we have so many challenges to solve here, and this notion of decentralizing, of a trustless protocol, really speaks loud to us and to address those challenges.
No, right. There's plenty of application already working in Africa. We've been working with Bolloré Logistique, for example, on our side, on the traceability of cereals between some countries, more central, and the harbor on the west. So that was for the big industry, but there's plenty of also of other application. I don't know, Ashwin, if you have some views on the different blockchain services and application you've been maybe working for?
Yeah, so I'm going to start off with a reference, right? Which is like, I think in 2008 when people started talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning, people thought people were absolutely crazy, right? And when people start talking about blockchain now, people think we're absolutely crazy too, because they're like, how are you going to store information, right? So what I have particularly felt is, I think the focus on blockchain is a lot lesser than actually cryptocurrency, right?
Yeah,
because again, cryptocurrency is a means to an end. It's a cash transaction. You can either make money or lose money on the market. It's again controlled by X amount of people. There's no financial structure. It's like hedging. It's like gambling, right? And I know a lot of my friends who got into it after the craze started last year, right? So I bought my first Bitcoin back in 2011. I sold it in 2014 thinking it's a risky market. And that's when I started getting involved in blockchain. And so in blockchain right now, and this is one of the big things, and I love how Nelly said, tracing of medicines and actually getting a lot of those things, because those were sort of the ideas we had actually implemented at MEST back in 2017, 2018.
Wow.
There was a company called Checkit, which is in Nigeria, which is using blockchain to actually check the viability of medical inputs coming into the market. We've worked with companies such as Ben in the past, which have done blockchain-based registration for land disputes, which is a big challenge currently still in the market. There are other solutions currently available in the market as well, which are more focused on farmers and actually making sure farmers are equitable on market exchanges and market information as well. So the use of blockchain, I personally feel, has been jaded by cryptocurrency, and people are going more and more into understanding how cryptocurrency can be the basis rather than blockchain. Recently, we found out that the entire Ghana port is actually going to get automated and digitized. And we found out that there is a single person, a researcher, who's sitting there and trying to figure out how to do it on blockchain. And we're like, how is one person trying to digitize the entire port's operation, right? Like you need you need 300, 400 people to do this, right? Like there's so much data and consistency you need, and like there's so much work which needs to be done. So in those cases as well, I personally feel the adoption of blockchain is still very slow in this market. I personally feel that banks should be running at it, big institutions should be running at it, so that then the network effect for entrepreneurs, for it to cascade down, becomes easier. Like why is a medical startup which wants to focus on blockchain so rare? Because none of the big pharmaceuticals care, right? So the big pharmaceuticals, our systems work, that's how we wanted to run, but they don't understand the last mile, etc. So blockchain as a component, very low usage. Cryptocurrency, obviously massive. But just to add on to, I think, cryptocurrency, which is also a big thing, is I think financial regulations on the continent are still being figured out, especially when it comes to digital currency, especially when it comes to tokenized currency as well. So in a lot of those ways, the government sometimes doesn't know what to do as well. When they start seeing surges of cash going out of the country towards, towards this thing called the internet. So the government's like, I remember when I was speaking to the fintech office here in Ghana, and he was like, Ashwin, close to about $1.5 million went to this account, and I'm not sure what I need to do with it. And I was like, yeah, it's called currency. It's, you're sinking money into the internet. So I think even the regulations also are a big limiting factor for even the adoption of cryptocurrency. So I think while the governments have to become a little bit more flat in understanding how financial transactions will happen on crypto, I personally feel there also is a bigger challenge there, which when it comes to the entire blockchain component itself, when it comes to DPRCs and etc. So,
well, but actually, you're really right about the regulation being a real limit, but also maybe the fact that most of the people doesn't understand anything about what is blockchain within the government, and not only the lawyers, but also a lot of the one funding the projects, and probably also indeed the industries. Especially because it's very complicated, as you said, with one side the technology, the other side the crypto assets, and maybe on the middle, to jump on the question of Pierre in the chat, the one of the tokenization, which is one very interesting asset for Africa, but by the way, not just for Africa, but maybe worldwide, because the question was, how does distributed governance might create opportunity on one side, on the other side, some opinion on how tokenization of intangible or common assets could impact natural resources management for Africa, but maybe globally also. I'll let you both answer, but maybe just start to underline two things. There's been a lot of examples on tokenization worldwide, but in Africa with the energies, especially solar energies, which is pretty interesting to help with the traceability of the energies and everything. And that could be copy-paste basically with any energy, plus maybe some other resources. So probably this could be maybe, let's say, taken globally, replicate for cereals, for food, for pretty anything. And that's what is pretty interesting, being the tech, being a tool to help a big issue, especially the issue of transparency, but also the one of transferability of goods and needs. And on this, the transparency is a key, but also the governance is one, because in any place in the world, it's not just in Africa, but for sure in Africa, the one of governance, the will of companies and people to be sure that they will really have a clear view on how the product is going to be distributed, accessible, and everything is probably interesting. But maybe, Nelly, you have complementary views on the matter, which is pretty interesting.
No, yeah, sure. I tend to like to keep things very pragmatic, right? So tokenizations and everything, those are nice words. Those are all theories. We're gonna be running some pilots, but it's gonna stay as pilots. If we think about where we are at the present moment, if we want to drive adoption even of blockchain technology, it's gonna go through cryptocurrencies, like Ashwin mentioned, and not just all cryptocurrencies. What we've seen is that Bitcoin has the lion's share. I think it's huge, it's massive. Governments can take the time to figure it out, but the population has already figured it out. In Francophone Africa, where we don't have large exchanges like Binance or OKEx or the likes of it, people are exchanging millions of dollars per week in WhatsApp groups, in Telegram, in Facebook. So government institutions, they can try to control, they can try to take the time. Population is figuring it out. So I'm really hopeful it's be embraced from the bottom up. And it's not because it's a fancy word. It's not because it's the fourth revolution. It's not because it's the technology that's going to decentralize everything. It's because people need to send money to their kids in Europe. People need to send money to China or to Dubai to pay for goods. When they try to access with their CFA franc some dollars or some euros, it's very complicated. It's very complicated to do a wire transfer. It's very complicated even when you want to receive wire transfer. As of now, at Ijara, I have so many people coming to tell me, oh, we are a community, like our village has a community with people living in Germany, in France, in the US, and even in Cameroon or outside. And we are trying to put together a fund to build like wealth in the village. How do we receive some funds from the diaspora? This is the question. When we go through bank, we are asked so many questions, so many fees, so many like time. So they are using Bitcoin and the likes of it. The other cryptocurrency that tend to take some acknowledgement in Africa are like the Binance coin, because it's like the largest exchange and people are trading using it. And also Tezos, because we have started building a large Tezos community across Africa, and we are seeing more and more people interested in it and interested in the fact that they pay lower fees when they transact with it. So, and I believe that this is gonna be the first step of the adoption. To move forward, we need to have more talents, because a lot of people have ideas, but we are really lacking properly trained engineers, designers, like all the people that could be helping even institutions if they want to run pilots to develop it without having to outsource and to have to take talents outside. So this needs to happen. So at the same time that we are seeing this cryptocurrency adoption, we need to make sure to put a blockchain training excellence center across Africa and have all those young people that are currently unemployed and that are eager to learn a skill that will help them secure their future financial. And to finish my point, whenever we talk about cryptocurrencies, we're talking about money getting out, but I've illustrated a lot of use cases where money gets in. And I believe that, imagine if you train 1 million African in blockchain development in the next 5 to 10 years, and those people can work in Africa and they get paid from outside money towards Africa. So then you get a big inflows towards Africa. They can develop the local economies and the likes of it. So for me, this is my hope for the future, and this is what I believe should happen and can happen.
I love what you said, because actually, I remember 3 years ago when you were, I don't know, even going in Paris to meet Coin House and everything, all the exchanges, they said that more than half of their volume was for remittance in Africa. And it's very interesting, because there's been a very high shift these years. And now there's more and more projects to bring the money to Africa. But for example, for transparency and funding of NGOs and everything. So it's bringing the trust, and probably is going to be a very high change in mentalities, and maybe for projects. Yeah, right. Maybe you wanted to add, Ashwin?
Well, I'm just listening right now, because again, I still personally feel at the end of the day that, like, I completely agree with Nelly. I like, it's so much of a bottom-up movement that I don't think even the governments have realized. But that's the surprising thing, that I think the governments do have realized, but it's just that they are now facing the legacy redundancies around, I think, how they can adopt this, etc. But I think what is the bigger surprise for me, and this is also something which I'm still trying to work out with a lot of the big corporations here, especially in the markets we operate in, and why aren't big corporations actually trying to take that up as well? Especially corporations such as Procter and Gamble, or if you look at any of the big guys who are actually doing supply chain, and you can see the merits of tokenization on any of those value chains, right? Like you can understand that, working with quality inputs for farmers, working for quality inputs for, creating local medicines, etc. All those are super critical as well. So yeah, like I said, I think it's such a bottom-up movement that we have to just wait and watch about how this will actually be, again, like not a revolution, but this will actually be a very interesting trend to actually see how the government will match the population's demands, especially when this technology becomes out of proportion. Because again, I think Africa is still struggling with a few of the governments trying to control social media, etc. But blockchain is going to be bigger than that. Like once you create a network on blockchain, the amount of power you will have will, hopefully one day surpass what a government has in power as well when it comes to the digital market. So.
And Ashwin, Starlink is coming. We are really hopeful about Elon Musk putting decentralized internet out there. So those bans on social media, and that will be a thing of history. So we are really hopeful. And believe me, a lot of young people are talking about Starlink because they really get what it means for them. Because a lot of them that are computer science engineers that are working for companies abroad, it's really critical to have continued access to internet. So it's not just about complaining about government, and because some governments are getting afraid of losing control, as Ashwin mentioned, they lose sight of the bigger perspective, like these young people having a stable jobs are really even a guarantee for them to keep control, because they won't have time suddenly to go out there and complain, because they are self-sufficient, they can feed their family, and they can be, so it's, it's like just be more open-minded, having a bigger vision, but I guess government will be government.
Well, I would like to jump on this because there's a question which is exactly underlining the big paradox on blockchain versus governments. The question being about our views on Libra and crypto renminbi, because it's true very often this question is seen as the antagonism of the fact that blockchain is supposed to be the freedom and the transparency versus the big GAFA and everything starting to take the control of such technologies. I'll go and start with an example I like to share, which was not in Africa, but maybe probably give you an idea of what are the people thinking about this tech in Africa. I remember some years ago I met with the blockchain minister of Slovenia, because in Slovenia they do have a blockchain minister, and she said that she was very worried about the big investment of Chinese funds and state directly within the blockchain ecosystem of Slovenia, which is very, very strong. They have Bitstamp and all the big companies, because they realized that China was basically trying to push their ecosystem to be dependent from Chinese investors, and then to be, let's say, a weapon against the government, which was for years from the Middle Age, basically trying to keep the control of the harbor, while the big project of China, one road, one belt, one road, sorry, was actually trying to and aiming at taking the control of the harbor, and in need of basically something to exchange between from the control of the harbor to the tech ecosystem and the blockchain one. And this idea of controlling the ecosystems from big giants, from Chinese giant or American one, is often considered, at least in the media, as a big risk of sovereignty on African ecosystem. Do you have any, I don't know, thought? Even though you're both very right, meaning that I fully agree that there are for now some merit, because it's not here yet, at least, but and that blockchain should first be seen as a public one, meaning the decentralized, and probably the interesting part being the public blockchain. But maybe you have some thoughts and ideas about these big giants taking the control of some ecosystem, with maybe the sword on the head of some ecosystem in Africa.
Can I start? So it's a very interesting question, the sovereignty, and as mentioned before, for me, yes, theoretically, I understand the needs for a country to have sovereignty because the interest of the country doesn't necessarily align with the interest of other countries. But what does it mean to have sovereignty when you're a country with 10 million population in a globalized world? What does it mean exactly? What does it mean to have sovereignty in a world that is controlled by US dollar dominance? What does it mean to have sovereignty when you are in Francophone Africa and most of the decisions are still taken from Paris? So I'm not so sure about this debate around sovereignty. I don't feel like a lot of countries in the world currently enjoy this sovereignty. So I prefer giving control to a lot of anonymous computers out there and believing in the wisdom of crowds and having this globalized currency, globalized trade that will at least be fairer to everybody. I don't believe in the thing that is gonna make everybody rich. Everything will be perfect, but at least it's gonna be a fairer world. When it comes to GM, aka Libra, yes, it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be integrated in Facebook. A lot of Africans are using Facebook, but will it help African to trade with other countries? I don't know. I don't think so. Is it convertible with any African fiat currency? No. So despite all the tiny, very pretty African kids Facebook puts on their ads for GM and Libra, I don't really believe it has nothing to do with Africa. It has everything to do with Facebook asserting their power everywhere, and that's it. And for the renminbi, digital renminbi, I mean, it's merely a way for China to track, collect taxes, control the population, and track transactions. I don't even think it's a cryptocurrency, so I have nothing to say about it.
Maybe Ashwin, you want to jump on maybe you have some views on the matter?
I just think Nelly has such an interesting way of saying these things in a very crude and direct way that I need to now politically clean it up. But anyway, yeah, I agree. I think when it comes to Libra, so I think when we met a few people at the Facebook team and they started talking about Libra, you could see that I personally felt that it didn't have any value on a citizen of a particular country rather than as an individual of a human being, as an individual or a human being. It had value to a Facebook user, right? And the assumption is that Facebook will have all the users in the world go on and go for it. But again, no one talked about what the Libra documentation was. No one talked about how KYC would be still done. Because see, at the end of the day, when Facebook is trying to set a rule across like that, across multiple economies, at the end of the day, regulations are still going to act up. And that's literally why I think Nelly and me are always talking about bottom up, right? Because if we have a bottom up approach, then the government learns how to adapt rather than if it comes from top down, where it's like, okay, now the government is given these rules and it's Facebook or it's one of the big corporations who's negotiating. So thereby the rates and how actually is controlled, like all these things start coming to questions. And again, blockchain is meant for transparency. So if those questions cannot be answered through transparency, then blockchain is officially a no, right? Like people like me who have built into blockchain's vision since it started, we're all like, oh, it's just yet another, like just yet another mask. Now, I think when it comes to China particularly, and again, I think we've heard different concepts of it in different forms. Like India also has a UID. I think a lot of people have like social security numbers, etc. But the goal of actually getting, I think, it on blockchain for various purposes is still yet to be unknown. Right, like the whole point of blockchain also is anonymity. Like we still don't know who's created blockchain, crypto coins. Like that's the beauty of these things, right? And that's the whole point is, do we necessarily feel that there should be an angle where recognition should happen on anonymous layers? I don't think so. Like most, like again, if there are developers and if there are people listening to this, I remember the IRC days when when there was no MSN Messenger, when there was no Yahoo Messenger, there was basically internet relay chat, and you could choose whatever username you wanted to and still have a great conversation with people, right? And at that time, deals were done. I wrote code for clients online, not knowing who the clients were. So it's like, at the end of the day, trust is a big thing. And with anonymity also comes a lot of, inbuilt trust and governance that you need to deliver. So again, I'm not still seeing what the long-term win is going to be, but I do definitely agree that getting, I think, citizens and making sure that citizens have access to a unique identifier, and making sure, given the pandemic situations, given all of those things happening this year, it's always good to have an identity, but I don't necessarily feel that it has to be on blockchain. So yeah.
But maybe behind the question of sovereignty is another one which is pretty interesting, being the fact that it is true during years, blockchain and crypto were really seen as an issue for and only for entrepreneurs. But these days, there's a little shift, which is, let's say, pretty tiny for now, but still interesting, being corporates are starting little by little to take this technology, let's say, seriously, because for years it was just startups trying to take the control of this tech and trying to understand how it was working and develop services. But now you have more and more corporates starting to take the technology to solve some issues. And these ideas of having the tech as a solver of issues is probably probably new, and especially promising in developing countries. I don't know if you have some examples of solution projects, services you have in mind that could be maybe developed by corporates, or maybe already developed by startups and promising at a global scale. I'm sure, Nelly, you have.
Global scale, I'm not sure, but one thing I'm really looking at, and I met some young people trying to tackle it, is the insurance. I think in Africa, less than 3% of people are insured, and a lot of times when we talk to people, they say, "Oh, because we pay our license policy, and then when we have like something happen, the insurance company just disappeared." So it's about trust. It's about making sure that when we establish a contract with an insurance company, it's going to be enforced. So maybe the usage of smart contracts to power it could help people get more insured, and also prevent people from total poverty when a life just happens. So this I'm really hopeful for, and I really hope that, I know AXA in France has already put in place like a pilot, not even a pilot, it's something that is already running to cover delay in flights. But so this is something I really hope that will make will reach a global scale, at least global African scale. Yes.
Yeah, Fizzy in AXA was the insurance product, decentralized and automatic with smart contracts. Pretty interesting. I don't know, Ashwin, if you have maybe some.
Yeah. So I think there was, and again, I'm not sure of a global context, because again, there's too much happening on the global context, but I can definitely give it to you on an African. So we were following, like I mentioned, there's a company called Check It in Nigeria. There's Ben in Ghana. There's a few other startups in Ivory Coast as well, which are now revolving around digital identity, such as Base, and also like other things around Rwanda and Uganda around Solar as well. So I think on the continent, you can, like, I think you had mentioned, Fabian, it's a very entrepreneurship driven model, which is like, okay, we see that this problem is cool. We see this problem can be solved by blockchain. Let's do it. Yeah, so I think those are pretty much the examples I have, like digital identity, agriculture, land registration, counterfeit medicines. I think those are the different like use cases we've seen on the continent, but I think there's going to be more, like within the next, like, I think 1.5, 2 years, I think blockchain is going to be an integral part in pretty much a lot of different services.
Yes, and if I can add something to that, I'm not seeing it yet. I think Zen Finance in Nigeria is starting to do something around it, like decentralized finance. The concept of doing lending and borrowing in peer-to-peer modes. And every time I look at it, I'm fascinated. Why? Because I feel like what we call Suzu, Tontine, like saving circles in Africa, have been like those decentralized finance, but in an informal way. And that has been how, to be honest, a lot of entrepreneurs, traditional entrepreneurs in Africa, got their financial empire financed, like outside of banks and the likes of it. So by having a group of 20, 30 people that know themselves and that collect money every single week, every single month, and one of them take the jackpot and can launch a business and prosper with it. So with decentralized finance, you can pretty much take that at scale. So I'm really fascinating about what's happening there. I hope even Ijara will start making some announcements soon on that area, because for me, it could be a great way to finance farmers, to make sure that the diaspora that we have, the rising middle class that we have in urban cities, and the rural people doing farming that are shepherds could get, proper financing at reasonable interest. Because people talk about like microfinances in Africa providing financial inclusion, and I'm like, 20% rates per year. What is financial inclusion? So are we saying that in Africa, businesses have a margin of 80% to be financed at 20% a year? Come on, let's not be joking. So let's have proper ways to get people enabled, to enable economies, to enable, to power local entrepreneurs, be them not even tech entrepreneurs, be them even SMEs, and because we need those. We need that tissue to give employment to our youth.
Maybe I'll go with one of the last question, but maybe to jump on what you said, it's true that when you just, I don't know, Google blockchain Africa, you already find what looks like more dream than reality. You see, you read Icon City, and also a lot of projects looking like blockchain washing more than blockchain solutions, let's say. Do you have, I don't know, some views on the big issues that could be solved? You say microfinance. Maybe there's also some issues with the idea of rights globally. Even you mentioned, if I remember correctly, a Bitstamp with cadastre on all these big issues being solved by the technologies maybe tomorrow. Do you have any, I don't know, ideas of the biggest challenges that we should watch very carefully in Africa when it's related to blockchain, but maybe also of other technologies? I don't know.
Biggest, I'm not sure, but I mean, we already cited, as you mentioned, money transfer, payments, like the way to trade with outside worlds. We mentioned land registry, we mentioned agriculture. One thing we didn't mention, and I was yesterday with a lot of Cameroonian artists, and we plan with my friend that has a digital art gallery to do like an African tour. We're gonna come to Accra, Ashwin. I hope I'm gonna meet you, because I'm trying to convince African artists to digitize and to tokenize their art and to sell it at non-fungible tokens on blockchain, because as of now it's making like a burst, but I feel like through this burst there could be a momentum for African artists to get their work out there and to get some funds. I mean, to get some payments for their art, and even in some platform you can even include like creators royalties. So as the art gets more known and increase in value, you still get micro payments. So this area, this is the one area that I'm really excited about over the next couple of months, maybe 6 months. So to make sure that as many African artists as I can put their work out there and mint them on the Ethereum blockchain or Tezos blockchain and sell them and be able to live with it.
Yeah, I think NFTs are like probably the most exciting things right now. I have a bunch of friends in America who've been selling so many art pieces online. But also, I think thinking through all the industries we also spoke about, one of the other things which I think we're still trying to figure out, but again, it'll be a function of commerce, if not, but it's also, I think, like utilities, which is what a big thing is actually being spoken about right now. I'm part of a conversation which is actually currently happening in my state in India, where the minister is actually talking about how they can bring in blockchain to make sure there is more, I think, transparency on seeing how they can allocate more usage of power, water to, I think, the lower bottom pyramid as well. So I didn't want to probably jump again, but it is a form of commerce, but actually getting more integral things put in there is actually even more necessary as well. So yeah.
And another technology that, I mean, because I've done AI for like the last 3 years of my corporate career, and I'm really looking at all those applications that try to that translate our native African languages like Wolof in Senegal to English or French, because as people seldom say, I still remember that I couldn't communicate with my grandmother because unfortunately I don't speak my village language. And I think I lost a lot of the knowledge that she could have transmitted to me because she couldn't write. So the only transmission is still, I must have still oral transmission, and having those kind of technology, be able to communicate with our grandparents, with our all eldest in the village could be a great way, especially when it comes, for example, to medicinal plants. We talk about Africa being resisting more from COVID, and people usually say, oh, it's because of the sun, it's because the population is younger. Nobody talks about our medicinal plants, the fact that it boosts immunity, and those were transmitted by the elders in the villages that started like putting together a lot of different plants and telling people, oh, you should drink that twice a day, you should. And you know, I'm not a scientist. I'm not saying that it's thanks to that, but I'm saying there's something there, and I really want this technology being more used to help us gather this knowledge from our elders before it's too late.
That's super interesting, because actually the ideas of having the tech as a solution is always pretty meaningful, and that's actually at Havas what we are trying to work with. So maybe just to thank you both. This has been a great discussion, and we have had a lot of questions on the chat. So thank you all, and thank you to all the listeners. Maybe thank you again, Nelly. We'll be closely following the next news of Ijara and of Tezos in Africa. Thank you again, Ashwin. Same for Matt, and do not hesitate to share all your news in any need. On our side, we remain at your all disposal. If you have any question, want to contact us or ask anything, you can just send an email to blockchain@havas.com. And I hope we'll be able to all meet again to discuss blockchain and maybe to work on new projects for Africa and more globally on blockchain technologies and maybe also tech. Thank you all in any case, and maybe see you very soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.